Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why some kids just seem to struggle to go to school, even when they might want to learn? This new research dives deep into the world of autistic and ADHD kids, who find school tough, and it gives us a unique peek inside their mind. Today we're exploring a fascinating study that looked at autistic and ADHD students, often called AuDHD students, who are experiencing difficulties with school attendance and the big feelings that come with it. Imagine trying to navigate a world that wasn't quite built for how your brain works, and that world is school. That is the focus of this research. The scientists wanted to understand what is actually making school so stressful for these students from their own point of view, not just from what adults think. Because, let's be honest, the people actually living it are the real experts. So, how did they do it? They used a really cool tool called the Student Stress Investigation, or SSI. Think of it like a giant deck of cards, each with a different potential school stressor written on it. We're talking things like, the classroom is too loud or quiet, I have difficulty doing things that are not of interest to me, or school is too unpredictable. They had 31 remarkable young people aged between 9 and 18, diagnosed with both autism and ADHD. These students, on average, were missing about 3.5 school days a month. The kids first went through all these cards and sorted them into 2 piles, one for things that felt relevant to them and one for things that didn't. Then, for the relevant stressors, they ranked them from the smallest stressor to the biggest stressor. It is like they're saying, yeah, this is tough, but this is the stuff that is really breaking me. And what did they find, drumroll please? The absolute top stressors, the ones that came up again and again, were things like classroom environments being too loud or too quiet. This highlights how much sensory experiences matter. Imagine trying to focus when the sound is just wrong for you, or if it is so quiet you are afraid to even make a peep. Then there is uninteresting tasks. This isn't about being lazy, it is about brains that are wired to be intensely engaged by what they find fascinating, and struggling when the material just doesn't spark that interest. Unpredictability was another big one. For some, knowing what is coming next is crucial to feeling safe and prepared. Having the schedule change without warning can be incredibly unsettling. And finally, school days being too long and feeling constantly rushed. That feeling of always being behind or having to rush through things can be exhausting. What is really powerful is that the kids didn't just pick the cards, they explained why. This is where the story gets even richer. Take the classroom is too loud or quiet stressor. For one student, it was about the sensory overload of a noisy room making it impossible to concentrate. But for another, it was the silence that was stressful, because they were worried about making a noise and attracting unwanted attention. This shows that even the same stressor can be experienced in totally different ways, and it really underlines why a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. It is not just about what is a stressor, but how and why it is a stressor for that specific person. When they ranked the biggest stressors, the ones causing the most distress, it was interesting to see some overlap, but also some shifts. The classroom environment and difficulty with uninteresting tasks remained high, but other things like I just can't seem to get my brain to slow down, and the school day is too long also really stood out here. This suggests that while many things might be relevant stressors, only a subset are the ones causing the most gut-wrenching anxiety, day in and day out. And if they had a magic wand, what would they wish away? This is where the researchers looked for the absolute priorities for change. And here's a key takeaway. There wasn't one single thing that everyone wanted to get rid of. Instead, there was a lot of variety. This tells us that school distress for AuDHD students isn't usually caused by just one big problem. It is more like a complex web of interconnected stressors that are deeply personal to each student. What's a top priority for one might be less so for another. This highlights the immense value of asking students directly and personalizing support. So, what does all this mean? This research gives us a powerful, direct look at the school roadblocks faced by AuDHD students. It highlights that when schools are designed with neurotypical brains in mind, they can unintentionally create significant stress for neurodivergent students. The solution isn't about fixing the kids, it is about fixing the environment and the approach. We need to think about sensory, friendly classrooms, more engaging and flexible learning activities, and predictable routines. The study also strongly emphasizes that asking students themselves what is going on is incredibly important. Tools like the card sort are brilliant because they allow students to express themselves in a way that might be easier than just talking, especially when emotions are high or complex. It champions the idea of proactive, personalized support. Instead of waiting for a student to completely disengage, We should be working with them to identify and address these stressors before they lead to significant absenteeism. Now, like all research, this study has its strengths and a few limitations. A big strength is that it is one of the first to really focus on the AuDHD experience specifically, using a participatory method like card sorting. This is gold. On the flip side, the sample was mostly white Australian students, so we need to be careful about generalizing these findings to other cultural or socioeconomic groups. Also, while the card sort is great, sometimes having more in-depth interviews alongside would give us even more layers of understanding. Looking ahead, the implications are huge. We need better school environments, better teaching strategies, and a deeper understanding of how sensory, instructional, and social factors all interact to create or alleviate stress. When we create schools where neurodivergent students can feel safe, be themselves, and participate authentically, we're not just helping them with attendance. We're supporting their overall well-being and their right to an education. This research really pushes us to move beyond isolated fixes and think about a more holistic, student-centered approach. What do I think of this study? I think it's incredibly important work. It's a beautiful example of putting the voice of the student at the very center of research. The card sorting method is brilliant for uncovering nuanced experiences that traditional methods might miss. The findings about sensory issues, the need for interesting tasks, and the impact of unpredictability are well established, but seeing them illuminated so clearly through the lived experiences of AuDHD youth is powerful. The fact that there is no single magic bullet stressor is also a critical insight, underscoring the need for individualized, systemic change. The limitation about the sample diversity is definitely something to keep in mind. Future research could absolutely build on this by ensuring a wider range of voices and experiences are included. I also love the idea of combining the card sort with follow-up interviews to really dig into those unique experiences. Ultimately, this study is a call to action for educators, parents, and policymakers to listen more closely to neurodivergent students and to co-create school environments that truly support their learning and well-being. That's it for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this research as fascinating as I did, hit that like button, leave a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss our next dive into the world of science and the human mind. See you next time.